Hello and welcome back. I'll be attempting an all-glass mortar and pestle here on the Jasa channel. I'll start out by flaring open this 12mm tubing for a blow tube attachment to a much larger 40 by 5. And so a mortar and pestle is a hand-operated device used to smash and grind various items. It's largely used to grind up spices and other food-related items, but might also be used in a laboratory to prepare certain ingredients for an experiment. And so I'll be running an experiment at the end of the video, a classic acid versus base reaction. Make sure to stay tuned to check it out. So this is the 40 by 5mm tubing. I'm jabbing it in and out of the flame to more gently warm it. That's something I've learned from my experience with soft glass. It's a good way to bring up the temperature more slowly to prevent any stress and cracking. Now, soft glass definitely likes to crack more often, but this tubing is also pretty thick and jagged as well. But I'm marvering down the end of it, that way I can start puffing it out to even out the wall thickness and pop out a nice centered hole as well for that blow tube attachment. I pulled out a little bit of glass to help close it up, and now with some good heat and rotation should help even out the wall thickness along with a little puff. I'm going to let that area cool down a little bit because I want to pull a tiny bit of glass out from the tip. This will help pull that inner chamber forward, making it much easier to pop a hole. And now it's good to pop your holes in the flame, but you can blow out a thin little bubble to make it a bit easier. I kind of overdo it a little bit here and puff out this giant thin bubble. This is not normally what you want to happen. It can create a lot of glass debris, which is normally called bubble trash. You want to avoid inhaling that into your lungs. But now I'll just go ahead and finish prepping the end of this tubing for a hot seal attachment. And so a mortar and pestle can be made out of a variety of materials, such as granite and ceramic, different types of wood, and even glass. Each have some advantages and disadvantages. A harder material like granite or stone is usually preferred, mainly for its durability. Wood could be pretty durable as well to stand up for impacts, but it's pretty porous, so whatever you're grinding will eventually work its way into the wood, which could lead to bacterial growth. And finally, glass, which may not be the most desirable as it cannot take a very hard impact. Not only could you crack or break the vessel, but smaller impacts can leave tiny impact craters into the surface, which won't entirely destroy the vessel, but it might release some glass dust into whatever you're grinding. But now it is the most stain resistant, thus being the easiest to clean and well suitable for long-term storage of what's ground inside. It's also a good choice for liquids, which might not be a good option for other materials such as wood or metal. And so I'm melting and condensing the tube back. The walls are getting a bit thicker, almost 6 to 7 millimeters. And so when I heat it up and blow it out, it'll end up with a very nice round sphere. And now this technique works a little better if you have a larger torch and can kind of encapsulate the entire thing. So you can also try a 3-puff technique. You can check that out on one of my first videos of just puffing out a very large sphere. It was for the very first magnet experiment on the channel. I've done several magnet experiments since then, and I also plan to do another electric generator here coming up. And so if you happen to be attracted to the field of magnetism, then make sure to subscribe. And so the outside of the mortar is looking nice and round. But by looking through the mortar, I can tell that the wall thickness isn't perfectly even. Now I can melt it back down a little bit and puff it back out a couple of times. That will help spread those thicker areas out into the thinner sections, and those thinner sections becoming larger as they absorb the surrounding glass, giving you a nice even wall thickness all the way around. And so I flattened the base of the mortar so it doesn't roll around. I'm not going to try to concave the bottom like normal to form a rim, as I want the items inside to sit flat. I've attached a solid puntee, and now I'm going to go ahead and puff and pull the neck out to stretch and thin it. I'll come back into the flame and puff out a small hole in order to remove the blow tube without closing up the vessel. And so I need to apply a lot of heat to start flaring open the hole, but at the same time, that heat is going to cause the hole to close down and shut. It takes a little bit of heat control. And so I believe someone requested this project last year. I thought it was a pretty cool idea. Being solid and hollow objects, there's a lot of different techniques you could apply. Dot and line techniques, encalmo, frit and fume. But I decided to go with a clear version today and mainly focus on the form. Making larger objects like these by hand can be difficult as well, and so my next decorative version might be a bit smaller. If you have an idea for a project you'd like to see, or maybe just a question about lampworking, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. I tested it with a large rod, which I plan to use to make the pestle. It's good to test your projects if possible as you're working them, to make sure everything fits together as it should. If not, you'll have to reheat your project up to molten just to make any small adjustments. And so this is the very last 28mm rod in my shop. I use this larger rod to make marbles and lenses. It can give you the best clarity compared to melting a smaller rod, like the one in my right hand, into a larger shape like the one in my left. You might end up with a lot of tiny bubbles or small imperfections that mixed in as you're gathering it up. And now I'm going to remove a little bit from the end, finish up the tip, and it's looking like it's done. I guess it's not actually done. Yet. You only fail the moment you give up. You can always give it another try. And so I'll have to try again here, but with a much larger 31mm rod. I bought a small crate of these a while back. I was saving them for some unique project or some kind of scientific experiment that needed very large glass rods. But besides that, it's super heavy and extra volatile to thermal stress, so I don't recommend it. Now that it's done, again, I'm going to put an opal in the handle. I do this quite often with my projects. I'm hoping it will survive being in such a large piece of glass. Holding it under a desk or in a dark space, you can see it's still glowing inside, which means the inside is still molten. I'm going to wait for that to vanish before putting it in the kiln. And so I ran the annealing process all night, and a couple things I noticed in the morning. Not only was the pestle a bit too long for the mortar, but the opal damaged the pestle. It caused an internal impact crater. It could be from the long annealing cycle or the thickness of the glass. These laboratory opals are generally compatible with borosilicate, but it does depend on the situation, like a deep encasement, for example. And so I removed about half of the pestle, and it's looking like a much better fit now. And so to test the device, I decided antacid tablets, and I can test those as well with acid inside the vessel. It actually worked pretty well. I got a nice fine powder. I don't see any damage on the mortar or the pestle either. And here you can see the damage from that opal encasement, which wasn't the best choice. But my choice of acid? Citric. And so I'll use some citric acid from some oranges here. It should have a very low pH, around a 3 or a 4. The pH scale is a method to measure how acidic or alkaline a substance is. It's pretty anticlimactic. It's also good to note that each whole number increment in the scale is not just 1 times more powerful, but 10 times. And so the pH of 3 compared to 4 would have 10 times the acidity. And then comparing 2 to 4 would be 10 times what is already 10 times strong. So it'd be 100 times stronger. And so it did create a lot of foam. I'm not entirely sure what it is, probably carbon dioxide. And now I'll try lemon, which can have a pH as low as 2. And so it seemed to react a little bit faster. I think it might have more to do with the antacid tablet. I thought it was going to react a little bit more like baking soda, which I'll try for the very last test as we've reached the end of the video. Hit the like button if you've enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming up here on the Matt Jasa channel.